Hello, lovely listeners. Now, this podcast was taken from a live recording with the Academic Archers, and we apologise for any imperfections in the sound quality.
So, hello everyone, and welcome to One Stiletto in the Grave, which is live from Academic Archers Conference 2025.
It is, and we are live from our sitting rooms with not a robot vacuum cleaner in sight, as this year's conference is on Zoom. And we have two guests, one who would, until very recently, have been joining us from Jennifer Aldridge's Kitchen in Home Farm, and the other is joining us from prison.
Hello.
A huge welcome to our guest, Jackie Lai, who plays Joy Horville, Woman of Mystery, and Angus Stobie, otherwise known as the bad boy of Ambridge, George Grundy.
And of course, the event that ties you two together is the car crash. And we think that Joy, you may have been responsible for George's arrest, because it was Joy telling Susan about selling George the fruit cider that made Susan and Neil put two and two together and confront Emma, and then she broke down and called the police. So that's our tip for the thing that binds you.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I'm fascinated by, even though I'm actually in the Archers, is what it was like episode of the crash in studio. Because obviously I was part of that. Jackie, can you share something with us?
Well, I can, but I'm not going to shed much light on it because I wasn't there. I was written into the episode, and then for various reasons, I couldn't be there. And they were having a terrible trouble getting all the actors together. So in the end, they decided that Joy was there, but she was unconscious. So it's so weird because I told someone and they went, I'm sure I heard you breathing. I'm sure I heard Joy, but I wasn't actually there. So sadly, Angus hopefully can tell you a bit more about what the actual recording was like.
Because you were there right in the midst of it, Angus, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. But Joy was there in spirit. We were all pretending that she was sort of somewhere positioned nearby. But no, it was really good. Usually we would record 3 episodes a day. But for that episode, because it was so technically challenging, we did it over 2 episode slots. And it was a lot of heads in buckets of water and walking on bath mats covered in water to sound like sort of squelchy marsh at the side of the river. So yeah, there was a lot of stuff done in person, but then the team did a lot of stuff in post to add, the sounds of the river running by and the what we hear with Fallon inside the car and all that was done afterwards as well. But it was quite a tiring day. Yeah, a lot of stuff to do, but it was a lot of fun as well at the same time.
And I guess Ness, who's our spot person, who was with us in studio doing lots of sound effects, I mean, she must have been running around like a mad thing. Was there anybody else apart from Ness in studio then?
No, it was just Ness again. But yeah, my favorite one that we were doing was we had big buckets of water on stools, and so Joe, who plays Fallon, and myself were putting our faces in buckets of water by the microphone, and then to sort of sound like we're coming up for air from under the water, we would pull our face away from the bucket of water, sort of splutter and breathe at the same time. And I think the final result was quite accurate. So there was lots of little things like that that helped it all come together.
It did sound absolutely amazing. I mean, I can see a lot of heads nodding. It really was quite an incredible episode. And I imagine it's very emotional too. Were emotions running high in studio?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of adrenaline as well because, you're trying to recreate a scenario in which, the blood would be pumping and the adrenaline would be going. And so I think we were all trying to do sort of star jumps in between and keep that energy high. But yeah, very emotional. I think the stuff with Fallon as well. I mean, Joe did such an amazing job in that scene in the car where it's filling up with water. Listening to that on that day, we were all getting a bit teary because it was just, yeah, such an incredible performance from her. But yeah, it was lots of feelings all at once, but it was also through it all that so much fun.
And you
Well,
missed out on that, Jackie. You missed out on it.
I'm half glad the thought of putting my face in buckets of water, I wouldn't have liked that. But it meant that I could listen to it just as a listener, because I hadn't been there. And it was shocking and exciting and awful to listen to. Yeah, I thought it was a brilliant episode. They all did brilliantly.
Brilliantly done.
we did too.
Mm.
We're going to sort of have a chat with you first, Jackie, and then come to you, Angus. But do chip in, Angus, if anything strikes you. I think what Sally and I are really, really curious to know is how much you knew about Joy's backstory when you got the part.
Absolutely nothing. Um, it was one of those things where you get a lovely email saying, "Would you like to be in the Archers?" And I'm like, wow, how has this happened? And it turned out, I found out later that Jeremy Howe I'd worked with in theatre, and he'd suggested me. But I think all I was told was that she was from the Northeast. We didn't know anything about why, but she was relocating to Ambridge, and that there was some mystery to her. That was it. That was absolutely all I was told. And then you get scripts and you read them and put some interpretation on it, but obviously not trying to be too specific really in those early days about anything really.
Mm. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because we know as actors, within the show, we do get drip fed a lot of information. But your character, I think, particularly, we're getting a lot of drip feed about her. How much of that information is new to you? I mean, how much ahead of time do you know about this drip feeding or the new things that are happening?
Literally when the scripts arrive, which is usually a couple of weeks before we record it. Occasionally they might give you a little hint of about the direction it might be going in, but usually not. Usually I can't wait for the postman to come and the scripts come through the letterbox, they're ripping them open and reading them and going, oh my goodness, so it's quite a lot, as you know yourself, Sonny and Angus. You have to kind of read it quite quickly and then let it absorb it, let it lie, and then go back to it, and then you kind of filling in the blanks.
One of the revelatory things I felt this week, and I don't know if everybody out there has listened, I hope you have, but was to do with your husband. And we knew that he was a bit of a scoundrel, but we didn't know the extent of it. And you shared as the character with us that, he'd had lots of affairs and so on and so forth. And it occurred to me as I was listening, how this is interesting for Jackie in terms of how does that then inform her relationship with Mick? Because it's, about the trust aspect of it. How easy, therefore, would it have been for her to suddenly decide to live with him? I mean, was that something that sort of, pressed itself on you when you read that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, if I remember rightly, over the years, she's referred a couple of times to a ex-husband, and that he wasn't particularly the nicest husband. So from that, you can glean it wasn't a particularly happy relationship. And I think if you think about how she was with Mick in the early days, it was all, I just want to be friends. I'm not ready to commit. I don't know if I'm ready. And so I think it took her a long, long time, and probably she's still processing some of that. I think I'm trying to think about, this is the first time she's had any sort of romantic relationship, and it didn't seem to affect her in terms of friendship with men. She seemed to get on quite well with the men she was meeting in the village, as long as it was, purely just friendship. And I think that was quite shocking to her when people thought she might have fancied Tony, because I just don't think at that stage it didn't occur to her at all. She was just desperately trying to make friends. I think she was so lonely and tried too hard to get on with people. But I think she's very damaged.
She doesn't give away information about herself, does she? I can think of a couple of times. There was one with Adel and once with Azra, I think, where they were asking about her, and she very quickly turned the questions back and asked about them. What do you think that's about?
Yeah, I think she's very, very skilled at that. She loves to know everything about everybody else and is quite good at getting people to talk about themselves. And she seems to have formed quite a lot of close bonds with people, but doesn't give a lot away. I think there's things that have happened in her past that are just too hard to go there, really. And maybe we might find some of that out, possibly, in the coming episodes. But I think she's put things away, closed doors inside that she just doesn't want to go there. And yeah, I think she's quite skilled at
She,
backing people away.
But she's also quite forthright, isn't she? Sometimes she's quite steely sometimes as well. I think with Susan, I think she wanted her to, apply to the shop because Justin was doing such a rubbish job, and she's quite sort of steely in that sense. Where do you think that comes from?
I think partly that's where she's from, the Northeast. I think we're bred quite tough up here. And I think yeah, the things that have happened to her, the things she's had to deal with. So the point we meet her in Ambridge, I think she's quite a mix. But yeah, she's not afraid to tell someone what she thinks. I mean, Lillian, she's had a little go at Lillian at certain points, didn't she?
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think she is quite steely, especially yeah, where she thinks she's right about something and someone else might not be. She's quite happy to share that.
Mm.
Mm. But people confide in her. I mean, despite this sort of steely thing, and she has been like that with I think with Susan and with Linda as well. She stood up to Linda, didn't she? But people confide in her, don't they? Elizabeth confided in her about depression, and yeah, Helen confides in her all the time.
Yeah.
What
It's lovely. I enjoy that side of Joy's character. I think it is partly that she does let people talk. She doesn't pass an opinion particularly. She'll listen to what people have to say and sympathize or, yeah. And I think, again, I think it's stuff that's happened to her, things she's been through that we may not yet know about, that have made her like that. Yeah.
Because she has sort of made friends, I think. Who do you think she would say, or you would say, is her closest friend thus far in Ambridge?
I think Helen.
Ah, okay.
I think Helen. Yeah. And, I imagine they've spent quite a lot of time together with the boys and she loves spending time with the boys. Yeah, I would say Helen. And the whole stuff about Rob, when she went with Helen when he was dying and things. And I think they've got really shared some really difficult things. And I think they're quite close.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, they really seem to have quite a special relationship, don't they? Yeah.
But she's very kind, isn't she, Joy? I mean, that's the interesting thing about she is incredibly kind woman. She can be quite steely, and you say, the Northeast directness,
Yeah.
but she's incredibly kind. And particularly, there was that moment, wasn't there, with and Good in a Crisis. With Ben, it was quite a long time ago on the green. Remember,
Oh,
and
yes.
she just dealt with the situation. I remember that was the first time I listening, not as Lillian, but as Sunny, that, this is interesting. This is an interesting aspect
Yeah.
of Joy that we certainly haven't seen before. And
I think you're right. I think that's the first time we got that side of Joy, and that might have been surprising because when she first came in, she was a bit and she didn't know anything about the country, and she didn't like cows, and she was all a bit towny. But I think that was the first time we saw her just deal with the situation and be very calm and very kind, as you say, and understanding. And yeah, that was lovely. I really enjoyed doing that.
Did
Yeah.
it surprise you when you got that script and that came up, or had you seen that in Joy? Did you?
That's an interesting question, Jane. I remember being delighted reading it and thinking, oh, what a lovely direction she's going in. that's the lovely thing about the Archers. You know, over time you get to see different aspects of people's characters. I think I probably would have always hoped that that's what she was like deep down, and just, you know, she allowed nerves and you know, overconfidence sometimes to kind of get in the way. But I think I always thought that she was maybe like that underneath it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she is very good in a crisis, because she chucked Clive out of the village shop, didn't she?
I enjoyed that as well. That was great. Yes, she did. She did. Mhm.
But despite all that, in personal relationships, she's all over the place, isn't she?
Yeah. Again, I think that's probably stuff from her past that we maybe don't know about yet. Has, yeah, led it. Yeah. I think, yeah, I wonder whether she hasn't got much confidence in herself, and maybe feels like, why would anybody want to be with me? I think there's some of that there, and an inability to trust. I think that's really been hard for her, even though Mick is such a lovely man, and I don't think he's given her any reason to feel insecure. But I think obviously things that have happened previously have maybe left her like that.
Well, it'll be interesting to see over time as well, won't it? I mean, have being drip fed the information you're being drip fed as well about the character, Jackie. It'll be interesting to see how that relationship does develop with Mick, and if that is kind of it's some healing for her in some way. It'll be very interesting as the scripts fall through the letterbox to see where it's all going.
Really, really does. Whether it's like a stepping stone, that it's her first foray into trusting someone else, or whether it's, you know, long term. As you know, that those decisions are out of our hands, and we just wait to find out what the script writers have decided on. But I could see it going either way, really, to be honest with you, as an actor. You know, I could see sort of drama and interest in either direction, really.
Fascinating, because we've got Angus here with George, who could go in either direction as well. But
Oh, yeah.
we've talked quite a bit about you being about the drip feed of information about Joy. Will you tell us about the book?
Oh, my book.
Yeah.
I will. So I don't know why, I've never done this before with a job, but when I started, I thought there's so many different writers and directors, and I haven't got a great memory. I thought I just need to write down for myself, you know. So I just started writing down who had directed the episode, who had written it, when we recorded it, when it was going to be transmitted, and a little bit about what happened in the episode, mainly about, you know, relating to Joy, but maybe if it was a part of another storyline, I'd do that. So I'll show you. I'm now on my second book, and this is my book, which someone bought me, which I love. So it's a do, and let's just all, you know, masses and masses of writing.
Such a clever idea.
Yeah, I love it. So if if a script comes through and I think, oh, I'm sure that I've referred to that before, I can have a look, and hopefully I might have written down. So it's really, really useful and lovely. Sometimes I'll just flick through it and think, oh, I loved that. Oh, that was so sad when that happened. And it's lovely.
Oh, I think it's a brilliant idea. I think we should all have done that, actually, because over the years, you know, you've got there's so many lovely storylines that we all have, and
especially, I mean, because you've been in you know, a long, long time now, so you will have forgotten some, won't you?
That's right. That's right. You know, and particularly for me, you know, stories maybe with June, Peggy, and things like that. You know, going back a long way, they're just nice little sort of moments to have. Now, I want to ask you, what do you think that Joy thinks of Lillian?
Oh, God, I don't know if I can share that with you, really.
Oh, please,
You
please
might
feel
go
free.
off me. I think she thinks she's great fun, and would be more than happy to drown a few white wines or gin and tonics in the pool with her. I think she's got her measure, and I think she's not frightened of her. I think, but I think essentially she thinks she's great fun,
Yeah.
which is true. She is. Brilliant girl.
I think that Lillian is frightened of her. I think she's frightened of
Do
Joy.
you?
Yeah, I do. I think because because she is so direct, and Lillian's not quite used to that. I think the characters we've sort of been forming a friendship now, aren't we? We had all the business with the gills and all the water sprinklers and all that, and then the wretched robot. Yes, so that was but I think we bonded with that. Her actually saying, "Look, Lillian, you shouldn't have done this." I know, like a little child.
That's right.
We
Yeah.
bonded through it, which will be very interesting to see how the relationship develops.
Yeah.
I think Lillian's a bit scared of her.
That's quite good. I like that.
Yeah. There's not many people in Ambridge that Lillian's scared of, I don't.
No.
Yeah.
Joy's definitely one of them.
Can we talk about Rochelle?
Oh yes.
Now, you said on another podcast that Joy and Rochelle are very similar. And I think what you said then was that they both like to be right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can sort of see a bit of that. Are there any other similarities, do you think, between them?
Well, obviously, because they've got the same background, there's a forthrightness that they both share. I think they're also go-getters. I think they both can get things done. I think Rochelle's like that as well. So I think they share that. I think we are finding, and maybe that they maybe deal with things in the same way when some things happen that they're not keen on, that they may remove themselves and somehow from it. So, I think like mother, like daughter, but I think there are also masses of differences. But I think me as the actress, I can see so many similarities when I'm reading. I'm like, oh, Joyce reacted that way, and so is Rochelle. That's interesting.
What's interesting, Jackie, when
think-
Rochelle appeared, because I know as a listener, and I don't know if you felt that as an actress, sometimes I thought Rochelle is just a figment of her imagination. She doesn't exist anymore, because we were taking down lots of different avenues. So for you, was it like, oh, she's here now? Was that?
I did. I knew a little bit before that they were going to bring her in. But it's about 5.5 years since I joined. And I remember when I first did my first couple of episodes, Jeremy Howe saying to me, so do you think Rochelle exists?
Oh,
Is she
really?
real? You did. And I went, absolutely. Oh, yeah. And I was like, yeah, I've always thought she was real, but I hadn't formed an opinion on what had happened. And it was interesting, hearing lots of the listeners' opinions, and some people were like, oh, I don't think she's alive anymore. I think maybe she died as a child, or lots of people thinking things like that. I think I always felt that she existed and something awful had happened, but I wasn't sure when or how it would unfold itself, really.
And we're still finding that, aren't we? I mean, I know you've recorded a lot ahead, and we don't know about that, but
No, that's right. Yeah.
but it strikes me always with Joy and with Rochelle. However we go down the line, there's always going to be stuff we don't know about. It just seems to be that kind of scenario somehow.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many rumours on the Facebook groups about, so many theories about Rochelle, and I think it was a huge shock when she actually turned up. It was,
It's so lovely, isn't it, when you can manage to keep it a complete surprise?
Yeah.
Not really possible on TV. We always seem to get spoilers, don't we, before big storylines. But it felt really nice that nobody had a clue, and it was all about that little taking us down that route of Joy's going to propose to Mick and all that, and then suddenly it's doorbell ringing and the do moment.
I know do you think, is he the love of her life, do you think?
I don't know yet. It's too early to tell.
I
I think she's almost forgotten the proposal.
Oh no.
Well, I think that since Rochelle turned up, everything about Rochelle, what's happening, what's not happening, I think it's consumed her. And so, it wouldn't surprise me if she's sort of forgotten that she'd even planned to do it. But I don't know.
I wanted to propose that if anyone wanted to propose to him. I think he's lovely.
He's being lovely at the minute, isn't he? He's been really supportive.
Yeah. But you see, it's the Archers. You never can tell. You never can tell. You don't know what's around the corner.
Get too cozy, you never know.
Yeah, there was just that lovely thing with the two of you this week. I thought it was so sweet when he was saying, you know, like, because it's a big thing for this person to sort of turn up and say, I'm going to move in for a while. And he was sort of very gently saying it would be helpful if I knew a bit more. You know, I can't really deal with this so much longer. But it was done in a very sort of sweet. It was
Well, it was.
a little scene, wasn't it? So, do you think she never seemed entirely comfortable in Jennifer Aldridge's kitchen, did she?
I don't think she was comfortable in that house at all. It was like one of those things where you think the reality's so different from the idea of it. She was so excited when she got there, and there were just so many rules, and you can't have friends around, you can't drink red wine, don't do this, don't do that. I think it was just far too restricting for her, and I think she wanted to be back in her own kitchen. Yeah.
Can I just ask a question, sort of going back a bit, but because for me, I had the same experience. How was it, when you first were parachuted into the Archers? I mean, how did you feel? Do you remember you will remember what your first scene was and who it was with, because you got a little book. But I mean, how was it for you? What was that experience like?
I was really nervous, obviously. It's quite daunting because, I knew the characters and you know them, and to suddenly be in the same room as them and having to act with them was quite daunting. I mean, obviously I knew you, which was lovely, and you were very kind and lovely. I did find it, and because she was brought in she was really annoying and irritating and slightly abrasive. So it's that funny thing of thinking, oh, I hope they don't think I'm like this, which is crazy, isn't it? We're all actors, but I think I was a little bit nervous that people would just think she was really irritating and not want to talk to me.
But the thing is, all you can do when you're given a script, initially you can only play the script, and I think it is that thing often with the Archers that you can give the producers and the writers hints about how they may want to develop it by the way you play it, and vice versa. I think that's a really interesting dynamic, I think, to the Archers.
Yeah, right.
And because it does feel, doesn't it, when you first join, it's like you're playing one dimension because you don't know anything about the character really. So you're trying to flesh something out that you don't really know about yet.
Exactly. So you can't, that's what I was saying a bit earlier about, not that you want to be vague, but you can't go full pelt down one direction because you're not really sure. And I think I've just always gone for, I'll just play the truth of the scene that they've given me, and not even try and delve too much into why she's there or why was she like that. Just this is how she is at the moment. She's arrived in this village, and just see what happens really.
And it's just worked tremendously well. I mean, she's had such a massive impact on the village and on us as listeners.
Changed a lot, hasn't she? She's like, oh, we've found out more about her, and it's lovely.
Yeah, she is this sort of woman of mystery, and it's been these sort of revelations have been, you've just handled them beautifully. I'm very, very aware of Joy as a sort of very real human being. She's just one of those people in the Archers that I know what I'd cook for her if she came over for dinner. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's lovely to hear.
And there's a lovely vulnerability there that you're bringing out so much. There was the lovely scenes, with Linda, Lillian, and Joy with the pantomime, and all that went tits up, pardon the expression. And Lillian and Linda came to her aid because she did get into a real state about that she was going to let everybody down, and it was rather lovely to be able to see that vulnerability, I think, and you played it so beautifully, all that.
Well, I think I've been really lucky, and I think the script writers have given me lots of really interesting, different things to do with her, which is just, it's a joy, isn't it? It really is. Really, I feel really lucky, really lucky.
Do you like Joy?
Yes, I do. Yes, I think she's one of life's good people. She's flawed, which I think is really interesting. and she makes mistakes, she gets things wrong a lot, I think. But always from a good heart, and she's always trying to do the right thing. It just doesn't always work out right.
Yeah.
I'd go to her if I had a problem, and I'd also quite like to have a laugh with her. So yeah, I do like her.
Yeah. I can see time is moving on. So can we just move? We'll come back to you in a little while, Jackie, but let's just move to Angus. So Angus, we think that you auditioned straight out of drama school. Is that right? For George?
Yes, so I finished summer of 2022, and it was my first audition off the back of the Carlton Hobbs radio bursary.
Right.
So I was involved in that, and I think was actually reading for the part of Brad. And so I was reading with Susie, who plays Tracy, and reading for Brad. And I think I remember right at the very end, I did a very short segment with George's lines. Um, and yeah, and that's it, sort of just went from there.
So were you surprised? I mean, when they offered you the part of George, I mean, did that come as a surprise, having read Brad fairly extensively?
Yeah, it did because I actually didn't really do much of George. It was
Yeah,
sort
yeah.
of like mainly Brad and then a very small snippet of George at the end. But I don't know what I did, but they obviously saw, saw something in it. So yeah, I was surprised when it came through with George instead of Brad. But I
Yeah.
think Taylor and I both suit our respective characters.
Yeah, very, very much. How, because clearly George's accent is not your natural accent. How did you find the accent for George?
Yeah, I remember the only note in the accent I got was "Don't sound like Chris Carter." I don't know why that. I still don't quite know why that is or why it was Chris, but maybe we sound similar, Wilf and I don't know. But yeah, I think sometimes actually it surprises me that the accent, the Ambridge accent, sort of West Country Midlands accent is more similar to my own than you'd realize. I think
Really?
sometimes actually accents that are closer to your own can be tricky. But yeah, I think as time's gone on, it sort of becomes more natural. And now I just sort of 2.5 years later, I'm sort of slightly used to it. So yeah, it's a good one to do.
I bet there are a lot of people listening today that don't realise that you're actually Scots because you do a brilliant accent. Actually, you've got
Oh,
a
thank you very much.
yeah. No,
Brilliant.
it's really because I think the first time I met you in studio, I was like, "What? This isn't him, is it?" My goodness, no, it's very, very good, very good.
Oh, thank you, Tony.
I, I know, gosh, you aren't that old, but did you ever listen to the Archers? Were you know, was it on in the background when you were young or not? Was this a completely new experience for you coming into the Archers?
Um, I don't think I had ever listened to it. I knew what it was,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah. So when I first joined, Jeremy, the editor, gave me a very sort of as much as you can summarize of the previous, 17, 16 years, in a short space of time. So
Yeah.
obviously you can't quite go into detail of every single aspect of that, but he tried to sort of bring me up to speed on who George was and the direction that they wanted to go with him as he was introduced, as he finally got his voice.
Okay.
Um,
So did you have an awareness at the beginning that some of these storylines were going to develop in the way they have, or were
Um, less so the sort of storylines themselves, but more just the sort of idea of where he would be placed amongst the other characters and how they would receive him generally in scenes as well.
you?
So in terms of background information, you actually got some background information about George, though, kind of where he fitted into and where
Yeah,
a little bit of that direction he might go in, yeah?
yeah, a sort of a brief summary. We had a call and spoke about his sort of important past events and yeah, just sort of discussed how we wanted him to be and on the scale of popular and unpopular and likable and not likable and yeah,
Mm.
trying to sort of add the layers on bit by bit and create this character who, even though has existed in that world for a while, was still new to the show.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, and but I suppose it's a good thing. Were you did they want you to sort of move towards a character who was a bit unpleasant, or is that kind of something that you developed yourself? I mean, where did all that come from? Was that Jeremy, or is it just developed as the scripts fell through the door?
Um, I think it was always the idea that he wasn't going to be the
Okay.
most loved character in the village, but I think also as I remember sort of right from the get-go, we were doing a scene. I think it was a sort of scene where we're lugging hay bales, and one of the first scenes I did, and even from then he was being not the most pleasant to Brad and sort of bossing him around, and so I think it set the tone quite quickly of the kind of person he was going to be. But
Mm,
yeah, especially with Brad, I think sometimes he likes the sort of dynamic of being the slightly older one, and
Hmm.
sometimes he can kind of get his way with him.
mm,
It's a really interesting relationship, I think, George
mm,
and Brad,
Hmm.
because he he does sort of bully him sometimes, but on the other hand, he does say that, he's going to miss him when he's sentenced. What's your take on that relationship?
It's with love. It's all with love,
Yeah.
bullying with love if that's possible. But um, yeah, I think I think the fact that Brad is technically family is really important, and I think family always comes first for George, and he'll do whatever he needs to do to look after and protect his family. And so the fact that there is a relation there, I think, changes it from, if Brad was just a friend to actually being in the same family. I think, yeah, he likes to get his way with him. He likes, being slightly older, and Brad is maybe slightly less confident, and so he likes being the one to introduce him to things and try and get him to talk to girls and have a drink and go out with him. And it doesn't always end well, but I think it is a sort of slightly like a older, younger brother kind of relationship in which he will, even though, yeah, there is a little bit of bullying, but he will always sort of stand up for him and stick up for him. And yeah, I think the whole recent scenario has really brought the relationship forward quite a big leap as well.
Hmm.
So you have played all this brilliantly. I mean, absolutely all this brilliantly. Everything that's happened with the storyline. Um, presumably there were probably moments within the storylines when there were gear changes for the character. Do you think that reading Alice reading the impact statement was a turning point for George emotionally in the whole thing?
Yeah, I think in the whole court case, or leading up to the court case, I should say, there was always that underlying thing of guilt, of extreme guilt, and knowing that yes, he stayed behind and helped people out, but also he's framed someone who's completely innocent. And every time he was sort of hailed as a hero, this guilt was growing bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think that scene where she reads the impact statement out is almost cathartic for him in a way that it's finally like you can you can take responsibility now. Like it's all out up in the air, and it's all out in the open, I should say. And finally, he doesn't have to hold that guilt anymore. But I also think, again, it relates to family, and hearing how it affected her relationship with Martha really, really affected him.
Mm,
And because I think she probably reminds him of his siblings and of Kira or Poppy. And so I think it was that element that really sort of touched something, and made him in the end incredibly sorry and apologetic, and allowed him to see the error in his ways.
mm,
And you did play that beautifully, I have to say.
Oh,
mm,
Um,
thank you very much.
Speaking of Poppy and Kira, I think it was really interesting. You're talking about family and how much it means to George. It was so interesting that they saw Eddie as George's weak points when they wrote that letter to him.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of interested in what you think about George's relationship with Eddie.
Well, I think he sees a lot of himself in Eddie, and I think, yeah, as I said, family is super important, and so Eddie sometimes likes to encourage that slightly sort of devious side, and will sometimes, cover for him, or you know, tell him that he's not going to mention it to Clary, he won't mention it to his mum, and I think he really respects Eddie in that sense. And he knows that Eddie's youth was not so dissimilar to his own. So yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities there, and yeah, he definitely looks up to him. And I guess with his own father, there was so much uncertainty there growing up. Whereas with Eddie, it was always his grandpa, and there was never uncertainty, and he's always been there. And so it's interesting how that differs from his relationship with Will and Ed, um, because of obviously all the stories that happened with the two of them.
How do you think that possibly affected him, that dynamic with Ed and Will and Emma, with him growing up? Do you think he was bullied at school because of something like that? Because he was slightly different? Or
Yeah,
how?
I think in such a small town, and especially in a sort of rural area, word probably gets around very quickly, and so I think it was probably mentioned. It did eat him up a little bit as he was growing up, and I think just always that sort of uncertainty, especially within family, is hard, and yeah, I mean the scenes that we've had, especially the one where he blows up at Emma and is very unkind to her, and I think obviously that shows us that it still does affect him, and he kind of unfortunately will use it as sort of a card to deal, or sort of a backup, when he doesn't quite get his way, he can say, well, look, this is what you did to me, so you have no sort of ground to stand on. Um, but yeah, I think all of these things affect who he is now, and play into it now.
Yeah. And jumping ahead, when he comes out of prison, and it's the script writers really, but do you think that he will end up as a reformed character or a villain? What do you think? Or have you had any hints about that? You can't
Well,
tell us now, but what would you like?
I remember when I first joined the Archers, and I can't remember who it was, but someone said to me, the last thing you want your character in the Archers to be is happy. You won't get as much work. And so I don't think he'll ever be reformed as such. I think he'll always be George, but I would love there to be a storyline where he is the hero and there's no catch this time. I think last time he had this storyline where he was the hero for to lots of people initially, and then actually he was holding this guilt the whole time. So I'd like there to be a story where he can prove himself, but I don't think he'd ever be quite reformed, as you said.
But I think, you see, you've been so clever with your characterization of this character, because certainly when I've been listening as a punter, not as being a part of it, you've given me so many dimensions to him as a character that I have, one minute I have sympathy for him, the next I'm thinking, oh no, but that is down to you, because you could have made him very one-dimensional, and we could have thought he's just a villain, he's just, a lost cause. But you've been so clever with that. So yes, I think it would be nice to see, when he eventually comes out, those moments when he could be a hero, a genuine hero. I mean, he may then go back into villainous things. I don't know, but yeah, be very interesting. Because I mean, in a way, we're all a bit three-dimensional like that, aren't we? There aren't really many out and out good people or out and out bad people. So it will be very interesting. And I think also latterly, in the eps that you've had, it does seem to be the family, doesn't it? His sisters, his grandparents that can open up his heart for him, that allow him back in again. That's what I've been feeling very much
But
listening to the episodes.
yeah, I think as well, I love recording those sort of slightly more vulnerable moments.
Mm.
One of my favorite episodes we recorded was the one where he finally tells Emma the truth about what happened with Alice. And it's so vulnerable, and it reminds you that he's only a boy, he's only a teenager.
Yeah.
And as all, young boys do when they have to open up to their mum, he finds it very difficult. And yeah, I just like those moments where you're reminded that he's not this just sort of
Absolutely.
village villain, and actually he's a boy
Still
who
little, and
is,
he is a little,
is
the terrible
yeah,
fear there was, which
Yeah.
again you played so beautifully.
Yeah,
You're
you,
so
it
right.
was because you made us in that moment forget that he'd done this dreadful thing, which had this appalling effect on Alice in particular, and we just saw this hurt little boy going, "Mummy, please make this go away." And it was,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I was in tears. I'm sure lots of other people were as well. It was, yeah, I'm tearing up now even just thinking about it. It was lovely. But he's not. It was also so interesting to hear him in those episodes with Uncle Clive.
Mm.
He was, I don't know, was he trying to brash it out like Uncle Clive? Because he doesn't seem to be an Uncle Clive to me.
Yeah, I think there's always things that in people's behavior that sort of piques his interest. And I think with Clive, it was one of those situations where I think based on other people's reactions, he knew that Clive wasn't someone that he should necessarily be sort of hanging around with. But at the same time, I think he respects outsiders. And he's interested by outsiders because I think he's always felt like one himself.
Mm.
And so anyone like that, where he can see himself in them, I think, yeah, it takes an interest.
So is that why? Sorry, Sonny, I'm just bumming it, but because I'm really interested in his the wonderful, sweet stuff about his relationship with Bartleby, which is
Hmm.
like a sort of really significant relationship in his life. And is that the same sort of thing, do you think?
Yeah, I think I just thought that it's always really interesting when someone who has this tough exterior is is so sort of soft and sweet with animals. I just find it such a lovely, a lovely a lovely thing to explore. And I think with Bartleby, it was a really nice opportunity to show that side because no one's, when he's there and he's talking to Bartleby, and we had those scenes where, he was being really sweet to him. No one else is there, and so he, he can be a very sort of true version of himself and speak his mind to Bartleby without anyone having to overhear. So I quite enjoyed those scenes as well.
How do you think he's coping in prison?
Um, I think he's quite good at adapting, and I think it's been interesting to try and have a think about he's had to sort of change how he's had to change and adapt to fit in prison, and then how much he reverts back to his old self when family members come to visit him. Is it like two separate personas, or does it sort of meet somewhere in the middle? That's what I've tried to look at. Um, but yeah, I think he's good at molding to the situation and to the person. And so I think he's probably doing better than people would have expected him to do. But how that affects him when he gets out will be
Yeah,
interesting to see.
yeah, yeah. How he deals with the outside world and what route he goes down.
Yeah, and how much of it he holds with him as he is reintegrated.
Hmm. I mean,
Mm.
Clary said, I think, of him that he was confident on the outside and insecure inside.
Hmm.
Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think George is riddled with insecurity. And I
Mm.
think that comes, right back to what we are talking about from his childhood, from people at school making fun of him because of his situation with his parents and his family. And I think, yeah, a lot of what he does is um, rooted in insecurity. And I think that allows him to make some quite brash decisions sometimes, and makes him lash out because there's something within him that doesn't quite sit steady. But
Yeah.
yeah, I would agree.
Mm.
And it will be interesting to see where he does go when it, because I mean there was that episode that you had not long ago. It was with Brad, and Brad was saying, "Well, I'm sorry, I can't do the video thing." He said, "Oh, it's fine, I've got bigger fish to fry." And you think, "Oh no, what will that be when he gets
Yeah.
out?" But
Yeah.
that's it, isn't it? Which way will he go? We will all wait with bated breath. But as sure as eggs is eggs, you play him so well. It's just so well. I applaud you. And the lovely scenes that you had, with Emerald, with Emma, they were stunning, really stunningly good. So
Yeah. And all props to Emerald as well, who is just so good to work with. And I love working with her because I never quite know what she's going to do next. And she's always so present. And yeah, any scene that we do together, I always thoroughly enjoy it. And she's fantastic.
yeah, yeah. Well, maybe you'll go into the tree business when you get out, but then there'll be some terrible accident or something. Oh, I'll tell the producers. You
Yeah.
can imagine him wielding one of those.
Yeah.
Runs with a chainsaw.
Yes, when he's in a
Uh,
bad mood. Whoops, watch out.
They'd be able to turn it into some sort of scheme somehow, I think.
Yes, yes,
Definitely. Just
yeah.
just thinking of family again, that whole business, is that just you've given me such an interesting insight into George's character. I'm thinking again about the whole business of Neil and the sausage roll and George getting fired. Uh,
Yeah.
and what so so that must have been a massive shock to him then, to have family sort of turn against him.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, I think, to see the difference between his granddad Neil and Grandpa Eddie, and how Granddad Neil can lay down the law with him and is not afraid to sort of stand up to him, whereas Eddie will always sort of give in. Um, but yeah, I think that storyline was interesting to play because his granddad and other sort of being so, I don't know, so strong on against him and you know really sort of putting it to him and resulting in him losing his job. I think he was for the first time quite taken aback because I think because of his past, he's always been allowed to sort of push the boundaries a little bit. And this time, actually, it was like, well, no, that's a step too far, and we're going to have to do something about it. But I think it still to this day, his relationship with his granddad, with Neil, is not quite the same.
Mm,
Mm.
of it. And he obviously had a real crush on Fallon, didn't he, at one point?
Yeah.
So that moment when he realized that, she lost the baby, and it was due to him. I mean, that must have been quite a turning point as well for him. Not a turning point, but an impacting moment for him.
Yeah, it's interesting because that period there was so much going on, and every day there was new revelations and things coming out that I think he probably almost felt slightly numb
Mm,
because he was riddled with so many different emotions, and then he's finding out about the baby, and then Harrison with the scene where he gets sort of slightly aggressive with him, and everything else on top of it, and Alice, and I think he probably was numb to it, and
mm,
so actually when he was found out to when he did open up to Emma and he realized that that had gone else further and gone to other characters, I think there was almost a slight relief there of, you know what, I actually do have to come clean and face the consequences.
mm,
And so obviously he wasn't happy about the outcome, but I think he knew that something had to happen. I think Fallon losing her baby was a big factor in that.
mm, mm.
Certainly, Lillian has had quite a difficult relationship with George, hasn't she, since
Oh,
the crash, to say the least. How do you think Lillian's feeling about George being in prison now?
she's delighted. I mean, there's no question, as far as she's concerned, that is absolutely the place he should be, because, her niece was in a situation where she could have killed herself. She was in such a state she could have. So as far as Lily is concerned, that's it. So it will be very interesting, when you do come back in, if we do have scenes. But that's certainly where Lillian is now, darling. That's the end of it. No messing about it. No.
Yeah, right.
I mean, what does George? We probably haven't had any interaction. Do you think George has any sort of feelings or what he thinks about Lillian? Probably doesn't, do you? Because we've not
Yeah, I
really
don't know, because I
together,
don't
have
even
we?
know if
No.
we must have had scenes together at some
Oh,
point, but only sort of in passing. I don't really think
and I
there's
don't
been
think
a relationship established there. But
he wouldn't care. He wouldn't care about Lillian anyway, for goodness sake.
yeah,
No, why would he?
I don't think he
But
has any
yes,
strong negative feelings. I think he probably thinks.
I think so. She's a wealthy woman, it's a bit of a pain in the arse with all her horses. But no, but it's very interesting. Definitely, Lillian. That's it. Best place for him.
Do you like George, Angus?
Um, oh, good question. Do I like him as an actor? Absolutely. Absolutely, because you never know what you're going to read in those scripts, and there's been some absolute crackers so far. Would I want to hang out with him as Angus? Absolutely not. I think within about 2 minutes of being with him, I'd be absolutely sick of it. But no, yeah, he's a lot of fun to play, and so from the actor's perspective, I absolutely love him, and change it.
Brilliant. Well, perhaps we should sort of open this up now and ask some questions, take some of the questions that people have been putting in the chat box. And we might start off with a question for both of you, which is from Philippa Hall. She says that she's looking forward to interviewing Liz, John, and Kerry Davis tomorrow afternoon. So her question for both of you, and possibly for you as well, Sunny, I think, be interesting to get your view, is do you find each script writer gets your character a little bit differently?
I definitely think so. They're all good, obviously, and they wouldn't be writing for the Archers if they weren't. But there will be certain writers that you think, oh, good. Oh, gosh, it's written by, because there's just an added edge, or there might be the humor. There might just be something that you feel that they maybe just understand a bit more than some of the others. Yeah, that would be my take on it. I don't know how the other two
I,
feel.
I think I'd say one of the only main differences is the way he speaks. So certain sort of words and lingo might be slightly different. And I will go in and sort of edit things ever so slightly, and if I don't think it was quite something George would say, but that's one of the things I can think of that will slightly different between right one right to the next.
I think you're right. I would concur with that, and I think they all do now. You know your vocal rhythm, and in fact, the producers and writers are really good about letting you kind of jiggle around with things like that. Maybe another radio drama you wouldn't. You have to stick absolutely to your script, but I think because we know our characters so very, very well, don't we? That we're allowed to do that. I mean, but generally, I mean, script writers are they're great, but yeah, it's about the rhythm. I mean, if I get into trouble, I just put a darling at the end of it, and then
I don't think Angus could do that, could he really?
I don't know.
After prison, maybe.
Maybe. Sally Cadle, Angus said, were you worried that George would be put in prison for a year and that you wouldn't be heard from for a very long time?
No, I knew that as soon as that was discussed as the outcome, I knew that we'd be visiting him time to time. But yeah, lots of exciting things to come as well post prison.
I think Lillian should come and visit your darling in prison. That would be an interesting scene, wouldn't it? We should suggest that to her, right? Anyway.
Maybe. Yeah, it's another interesting question for you, actually, Angus, from Stephen B, who says, do you ever wish that you were playing Brad?
No, I think yeah, I don't I think we're both I don't think I could play Brad as well as Taylor does. He's brilliant as Brad and gets all the notes perfectly. And so, yeah, I think us getting switched over in those editions is probably a good call. And the journey that George has been on, I've loved. So yeah, I don't think I would swap.
Hmm. I imagine that's true. The other, I don't know, do you ever look at another character, either Jackie or Sonny, and think, oh, I'd love to be able to play that character, possibly as well as the one that I'm playing, but
Um, hasn't occurred to me, if I'm honest. I think you're just so concentrating on what you're doing. But I mean, like there are characters in the artist that I love, Lillian being one of them, and Tracy Corbin. I think maybe Tracy Corbin. I'd
yeah.
like, yeah. I think she's such a brilliant character.
Such
Maybe,
a- and I, you know, not that I'm going to ever do it in a million years, but Susan Carter, because I just oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
This is my fantasy movie. Yeah, no, that
You know,
character.
it's fantasy archers.
Fantasy archer.
Jackie, there's a question, I think it's either from Barbara Williams or Meg Burton, I'm not sure which, just to say how fantastic you were talking to Ben during that psychotic episode. And do you think there's something in Joy's past that's enabled her to be so empathetic on that occasion?
absolutely, absolutely do. I think there was such a kind of it just rang so true the way they had written it, that this woman just had an understanding. She knew what to say, she knew what to do, and I feel that there is something that we may find out about that she's gone through herself or witnessed someone else going through. We don't know yet. That absolutely gave her just an understanding and an ease with someone in pain and in distress. And it was lovely to see. It had a really lovely reaction. People really did. The listeners kind of saw a side to Joy that maybe they weren't aware of. It was really nice, really nice. Yeah.
To be revealed what all that's about, Jackie.
Maybe
we will. Yeah, let's hope we find out some more. I want to know more.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting question. I'm sorry, I've lost completely who it's from. Who's interested in whether people treat you differently, any of you, now you're in the Archers, and has anyone ever recognised you from your accent alone? Angus, has anyone ever recognised you as Grundy from your accent alone?
I can't say that's happened before. No. But no, it's such a question. I don't think so. I don't think anyone who knows me has I think there's been a lot of excited family members of friends, but yeah, I wouldn't say so, and yeah, definitely not recognized from the accent. You'd be surprised to hear.
Yes, I think I have had someone recognize my accent, or they were like, "You're not," or "You know who you sound like." That's what people usually say. So that has happened a couple of times. Yeah,
Really?
yeah, it's really nice.
I had a bizarre one. I've probably told this story before. People may have heard it, but several years ago now, I was coming back from a Greek holiday on a very, very crowded plane. And you know how sometimes they don't let you onto the plane to the last minute. And it was just chaos on the plane. And we were all fighting our way through, overhead lockers, bags everywhere. And I must have shouted back to who, I can't know who I was with, saying, yeah, it's just over here. It's down here. And this woman next to me said, stop me. She grabbed hold of me. She said, are you Lillian from the Archers? And I said, yeah, I'm like this. Yeah. Will you do the laugh for me? And I went, yeah, all right. And walked on. That's a bizarre
I
experience.
love it.
Mad.
Brilliant.
The glamour of your lives, honestly.
What?
Jackie, it's a really good question from Helen Burrows here. She says, I'd love to know how Joy got all the money for the Beechwood house after she'd been left so broke by her husband.
You know what? So would I. Absolutely. Again, maybe we'll find out at some point. Absolutely no idea how she could buy the house. What does she live on? Fascinating. But I could genuinely hand on heart say, I don't know. So hopefully we'll find out.
I think time is not being kind to us now, Sonny, and that we need to, we probably need to wind things up a bit. We can hear the jangling of keys as the warden arrives to lock up George Grundy again. But honestly, thank you so much, you two, for joining us. It really has been it's just been so interesting to hear you talk about these two really, really wonderful characters that you've created, and you've given us so much to think about and so much insight. You really have. We so appreciate the generosity of your time and your thought. And you, of course, Sunny. And if anyone wants to see Sunny without Lillian's high heels, they can see her in episode 2 of the latest series of Casualty, looking very unlike Lillian. Let's just put it like that.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, of course, to the Academic Archers for inviting us to the conference. As ever, we always have a wonderful time, and you're a great bunch of people. And we're going to put a link to your website in our episode notes. Thank you so much, though.
So yeah, huge thanks to everybody, and until next time, that's it. It's goodbye from one stiletto in the grave. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to our One Stiletto in the Grave podcast. If you'd like to see behind-the-scenes clips and bonus content, please visit our Facebook page, One Stiletto in the Grave podcast. And if you'd like to ask any questions, follow us on Twitter at OneStiletto65. This podcast is produced by Raggedy House Productions, and the music composed by Tom Smith. See you next time!